So there's been a lot of news recently with Nicola Motors company and its ex-CEO Trevor Milton. So I wanted to just take this opportunity to talk to you quickly about the company Nikola, what I think is going to happen in the future, and what the resignation of Trevor will mean for the company, or what I think it will mean for the company. So, first of all, let's start with Trevor himself. Now, he's often described as a successful businessman, and from what we can see, it seems like that to an extent seems to be fairly true. So, he started a security company, which he then sold for a significant profit. So, obviously, looks good there. He then started a online company which seemed to fail, but I mean, lots of companies fail, so that's not necessarily a red flag. He then started a hydrogen company, which he had deals with another company, got into some issues, and ended up selling that company to then immediately come up with another hydrogen company, which he called Nikola. And there's definitely plenty of links there with Tesla. And I think from what I can tell, it definitely seems like he's trying to ride on the coattails of Tesla. He makes a lot he has made a lot of effort to try and link the company Nikola with Tesla and for people to compare the two, even though they're not actually anything alike. So let's look at the company and how he's developed it and his actions within the company. What we can see is a company that definitely has a very good idea on where it's going, and it definitely seems like a very good business model when you look at the business model itself and on paper. But the company itself, when you look at how it actually seems to be moving and what it actually seems to be doing, doesn't necessarily seem to be following that same kind of structure. Like, for example, he has said a lot about how Nikola is going to own the whole process. They're going to own the manufacturing of the hydrogen. They're going to own the delivery process. They're going to own the manufacturing of the cars and the vehicles. And that's how their business plan is. But when you look at it in real life and how things are actually panning out, none of that actually seems to be true. And they seem to be outsourcing a lot of the manufacturing. In fact, they seem to be outsourcing everything. I can't actually see any trace of the fact that Nikola is doing anything themselves or anything that they own themselves. Now, I might be wrong, and if you're a Nikola investor, please comment below if you know any information here that I'm getting wrong, because I'd really like to be corrected on that if I am wrong. But for me, a lot of the major red flags for Nikola was actually when it went public. Now, first of all, we have the fact that it was listed as a SPAC, which basically means that they couldn't be listed normally. So what they had to do was find an existing like empty shell that's already been listed in the market, and then merge with them. So it's almost like a listing by default onto the market, which in itself can be fine. However, it is a little bit of a warning sign of why the company needs to do it that way and why it can't do it its own way, why it can't just list itself. So we then have to look at the business, and at the point where they kind of did this, obviously we're looking at a company that they'd raised a good chunk of cash, 600 million. So they had the money, or they had some money behind them, and they had the ability to raise money. So was it that they went public purely because they needed more money? Had they run out of money, or what was the real reason that they needed to do this? Because it doesn't really seem to be clear. Now, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that they would do this because, this is a new startup and they need a lot of cash. So they need to build a new factory. They need to build the infrastructure for the hydrogen cells and the fueling stations. There's a lot of things that Nikola needs to do, but it doesn't seem to be doing any of those things. And in fact, when it went public, what happened was Trevor sold a huge amount of his shares so that he could buy himself a large luxury house. In fact, the largest, most expensive property in the state that he lives in. And I don't know about you, but if I owned a company like Nikola and I was going public and I had all these huge expectations of where the company was going, now first of all, I wouldn't be selling the shares because you're expecting those shares to go up in value considerably. But also, you would want that money in the company. So if you felt like you could downsize your ownership of the business, what you would do is just water down your position by issuing more shares to the market and therefore increase the value of the business. So you wouldn't actually be losing money by doing this, because that money would then be going into the business which you own a share of. So why he had to take that money out for himself, again, is another red flag. And I get you might be there saying, but hey, this guy needs money to live on. What Elon Musk does, because I'll use this example because he wants to compare himself to Tesla so often, is Elon Musk actually borrows money based on the value of his shares. So he puts his shares up as collateral to borrow money, so that he was then able to leave as much investment in Tesla as possible to help the business grow, which is what it needed to do. And that is what a dedicated CEO does. Whereas what Trevor seemed to do seems a bit questionable. Now, then going forward after that, you then seem to kind of get this constant underlying tone of, we're not really sure if what he said was true, and there's obviously a lot of allegations that he's been lying, and there's a lot of allegations comparing him to Elizabeth Holmes. Now, if you don't know who Elizabeth Holmes is, you really need to go and Google her, because she's a very interesting character all on her own. But there's definitely a lot of similarities between these two people. And so it's very easy to see why people are making that connection. Now, if we go look over at GM itself and you look at the deal between Nikola and GM that's just been struck, the deal makes a lot of sense for GM to an extent. I mean, effectively, they've taken a large stake in Nikola, while also they've got a large order from Nikola. So Nikola have said, all of our vehicles, all of our Badger vehicles, picture there, are going to be produced in GM factories, which obviously, like I say, is a great deal for GM, because they can then make profit on making those vehicles, and Nikola doesn't need to build their factory to be able to produce these vehicles, so win-win to an extent. Which is exactly what NIO has done. Obviously, they've partnered with a factory and got someone else to make their vehicles for them, and that's all fine. There's not necessarily a problem with doing that, as long as they're actually clear about that's what they were planning on doing, because Nikola kept telling us that they were going to own the whole process and that they were going to build the vehicles. So it's a bit of a mix up there, but again, like I say, it's not necessarily a problem, they're moving forward. So then the next issue that I have is actually with GM as a partner, because what I see when I look at GM is I see a company that very much likes to be on the latest trend and to kind of keep ahead of the curve, but without really trying to do it properly or intelligently. So you can see, for example, that they had their own range of electric vehicles with the EV1, which they kind of put no effort into and let it drop like a rock. Because, hey, I guess maybe it wasn't making them enough profit. I don't know. But they've just left it. They kind of abandoned the whole process. Is that a forward-thinking company? Doesn't really seem like it. They've then made loads of announcements about these new electric vehicles that they're going to make. And to be honest, it kind of sounds a lot like Nikola. Yeah, this is these amazing vehicles that we think we're going to make in the future. No idea how we're going to get there, but, how cool is this picture? So, to an extent, I guess, the relationship between Nikola and GM is probably quite a good one, because they're very similar companies in that regard. But, again, raises a lot of red flags for me on what exactly is going to happen with these companies. We then have the issue of the fact that these cars are going to be hydrogen. Now, those of you that know me or have seen my other videos will know that I'm not particularly a fan of hydrogen, because I just don't see it being the future. And this definitely seems to be the issue that Nikola and GM are going to have going forward with their Badger vehicles. Because they're planning on making all these vehicles, but they've not actually planned the infrastructure yet, or they've not built the infrastructure yet. So you almost have a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, because it's like, are you, as a customer, going to go out and buy one of these vehicles if there's no infrastructure for you to fill your vehicle up? But at the same time, is it worth building the infrastructure if nobody owns the vehicles? So they've almost got to do the two in tandem. But from reading what Nikola has said, it doesn't look like that's the plan. It looks like they're planning on building a load of these vehicles, and then maybe a year or so later, they might then start building out the infrastructure. Now, again, I might be wrong on that, and if you are a Nikola investor, please comment below and let me know where I'm wrong. But that's definitely how it looks right now. So that's my thoughts on Nikola, and it's one of the reasons why I really don't think that this is a good company to invest in right now. Because, for a start, I think Tesla's going to get there way earlier, to the stage where all these kind of comments that hydrogen is such a more efficient fuel source and it'll last longer and it'll make the vehicles go further. By the time Nikola gets into production with their vehicles, I can see Tesla's purely electric vehicles being able to match, if not beat, whatever Nikola comes up with. In which case, these established electric vehicles are able to do just as well. Why would you then buy a Nikola if you can buy a Tesla? I think most people will stick with the Tesla. Now, obviously, the only caveat to that, the thing that could possibly change my mind, is if Tesla takes a lot longer to get to where we want them to, and Nikola managed to ramp up that time frame. They managed to get the extra investment that they need to start building out the charging infrastructure. That could change things. If Nikola are able to get mass hydrogen refueling stations across the US, then they could be a viable option. Don't see it happening, but it could happen. As an idea, at the moment there are 45 charging stations in the US, and almost all of them are in California. So if you don't live in California, would you really want to buy one of these vehicles? Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.